Shalini Kishore, I'm a faculty member in electrical and computer engineering here at Lehigh. Very pleased to be hosting this seminar today. Rudy could not be here, so for those of you familiar with Rudy hosting, I apologize. Laura is joining us today. Laura is, Marsiglio is a alum from the ESE program, and we're very happy to have her back virtually at least. Laura currently is an associate analyst on National Grid's New York transformation team, where she works with stakeholders across the business to develop short-term strategy and robust long-term plans to facilitate clean energy transitions. She earned her BS in Integrated Engineering and Social Science from Lehigh's IDEAS program. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, this is a very neat interdisciplinary program across engineering and applied sciences here at Lehigh. And Laura did her study in materials engineering, economics, and environmental policy. And then she stayed on to do her master's in engineering in energy systems engineering, which is the ESE program. We're very pleased to have her back here. She'll be speaking today about the energy trilemma, utility strategy in the New York regulatory environment. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that introduction and for the invitation to present today. As Shalini mentioned, I work for National Grid's New York Transformation Office. So the function of my team is to aid the business in developing plans that will allow us to meet our clean energy goals. And in order to do this, we have to transform the way that we've been operating across all areas of our business. So today I'm going to talk about National Grid's role in the clean energy transition. Since I support our New York business, I'll first give an overview of the regulatory and policy landscape in the state as context for how it impacts our operations as a regulated utility. I'm then going to discuss National Grid's strategy and how we're transforming our business to facilitate the clean energy transition, as well as some of the challenges that come along with this. And I'll be looking at all of this through the lens of the energy trilemma, because I think it provides a really helpful framework for weighing different strategies and understanding the trade-offs that come with any particular approach. So I'm sure that most, if not all of you, are familiar with the energy trilemma. As a society, we're reliant on electricity and natural gas for nearly everything. I think we hardly think twice about the fact that we can flip a switch and have light, or click the knob on our stove and immediately have gas to cook with. We take for granted the reliability of our energy systems, and many of us don't really have to worry about whether or not we'll be able to afford our energy bills month to month. But our society was built on fossil fuels. So as climate change has become a more imminent threat, the need to decarbonize our energy systems accordingly has become apparent. We still have to maintain the reliability of the grid because that's what's expected by our customers. We also have to ensure that everyone can still afford what's become a necessary service. But then, to address climate change, we also have to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are being produced by our energy systems. So first, I want to share a little bit more about National Grid to give you some context for our role in the energy transition. National Grid is a multinational company. So we're headquartered in the UK, where we act as a system operator and also maintain electricity transmission and distribution infrastructure. In the US, we operate as a regulated utility, delivering both electricity and natural gas in New York and Massachusetts. We're also one of the largest investor-owned utilities in the country. National Grid Ventures, which you see notated as NGV on the screen, operates separately from our core regulated business, and they develop and operate large-scale clean energy infrastructure like offshore wind, solar generation, and battery storage. So today I'm going to focus primarily on our business and strategy in New York. In New York, National Grid has 3 operating companies. Niagara Mohawk in upstate New York serves a mix of electric and natural gas customers. KEDNY serves natural gas customers downstate in Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. and Kedley serves natural gas customers on Long Island. So with 4.2 million customers across the state, we have a really key role to play in meeting the goals that are set out by New York's climate law. So what is New York's climate law? On July 18th, 2019, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act was signed into law. The CLCPA outlines New York's goals and commitments to reduce economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions, with a goal of 40% from 1990 levels by 2030 and at least 85% by 2050. The CLCPA also has goals for renewable energy, so 6 gigawatts of distributed solar by 2025, 3 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030, and 9 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035. New York also aims to have 100% zero emissions light-duty vehicle sales by 2035. So we're expecting to see a significant increase in the number of electric vehicles that are on the road. So if we think about the energy trilemma, the CLCPA outlines New York's strategy for achieving the sustainable part of the energy transition. But the result of these goals is going to be a significant increase in the amount of intermittent generation sources connected to the grid. And this is ultimately going to impact reliability and affordability. So in addition to the clean energy goals that are outlined in the CLCPA, the New York Independent System Operator, NYISO, also expects that annual electricity demand is going to more than double by 2050. So this is going to further increase the strain on the electric grid, which is something else that National Grid has to take into consideration when we're developing strategy. So as the amount of renewable generation resources on the grid increases and annual demand nearly doubles, National Grid, operating as a regulated utility, is responsible for ensuring both the reliability of the grid and affordability for customers. So in New York, the Public Service Commission is the regulating body for utilities. And their goal is to ensure that safe, adequate, and efficient service is provided at just and reasonable rates with concern for the environment. So if that sounds familiar, it's because those are the pillars of the energy trilemma. The CLCPA outlines the sustainability requirements, and the PSC enforces reliability and affordability. Reliability in New York for electric utilities is measured with two metrics: system interruption frequency and customer interruption duration, SAIFI and CAIDI. And then performance of our gas system is measured by a handful of gas safety performance measures, one of which is emergency leak response time. So National Grid has to minimize outages to meet PSC requirements, or we face fines. So when I continue to talk about reliability as part of our strategy, it's not just something that's expected by our customers, we're also being held accountable by the regulator. Customer prices are also regulated by the PSC to ensure customer affordability. Utilities have to follow a formal rate case process in order to increase customer rates. This involves submitting a filing detailing estimates of operating costs like labor, depreciation costs, and taxes, as well as any anticipated capital expenditures. So I want you to keep this in mind as I walk you through National Grid's strategy, because any programs that we implement or investments that we make have to be approved in our rate case filing, otherwise we don't get funding. So I've provided some background on the New York regulatory landscape that National Grid operates within, but how do we go about ensuring that we're meeting all of these requirements? I'm going to talk a little bit now about the company's vision and the strategy that we've developed. So at the group level, at the parent company level, National Grid has the vision to be at the heart of a clean, fair, and affordable energy transition. As a company, we've set out to be a leader in the energy transition, and we have 4 strategic priorities that reflect this. So the first priority, we will enable the energy transition for all, ensuring that we deliver safe, reliable, and secure energy to customers and communities while building a cleaner and greener future. And we're also going to make sure that nobody's left behind in this process. The second priority, we will deliver for our customers efficiently. So this means that we'll work to minimize our operating costs while making capital investments where they're going to have the most impact. We'll also invest in the communities that we serve to make sure that energy bills don't become a burden. The third strategic priority, we will grow the capabilities of our organization so that we have the skills, technology, and processes in place to meet the needs of our customers. We'll also ensure that we have the necessary supply chain partnerships to deliver on our net zero commitments. And then last but not least, we will empower our people for great performance. National Grid has more than 30,000 employees. So in order to deliver the clean energy transition, we have to invest in the people that are doing the work. So this is why, as a company, we prioritize diversity and a culture of inclusivity where people feel that they're able to speak up and do the right thing. We've also made these commitments externally to our customers and stakeholders through our responsible business charter. The 4 pillars, as you can see, are aligned with our strategic priorities. They're also aligned with the Global Sustainable Development Goals, which were adopted by all UN member states in 2015. We have committed to achieving net zero emissions across all of our business units in the US and UK by 2050 and investing in the decarbonization of energy systems. We'll support a fair and affordable energy transition, investing in our customers and communities to accelerate social mobility and ensure that nobody's left behind. We'll invest in our people to build a net zero workforce, and ultimately, we want our company to reflect the communities that we serve. And the last pillar outlines our commitments to general operations as a responsible business. So National Grid has set these goals and commitments at the group level, and New York State has laid out climate goals and regulatory requirements from the PSC. It's then the job of our business to understand these and develop a strategy. So now I'm going to walk through National Grid's strategy for New York for each of these priorities. So first, enable the energy transition for all. Our strategy here is focused primarily on upgrading our gas and electric networks. So our general New York decarbonization strategy has a couple key areas of focus. First, we want to reduce the overall demand on the grid to minimize strain on the infrastructure and also reduce associated emissions. And we'll do this through energy efficiency and demand response programs. So if you remember, annual electric demand is expected to more than double by 2050. So we want to reduce that growth wherever possible. The CLCPA has set goals for large-scale renewables, so we have to build out the grid and interconnect these resources to support decarbonization while we maintain reliability. There's also a goal for distributed solar in the CLCPA. So as a utility, we want to enable behind-the-meter generation and optimize how those resources interact with our distribution grid. We'll also utilize storage to fortify the grid, balancing all of these new intermittent generation sources. Also in the CLCPA is a target for electric vehicles. So as a utility, we're able to advance clean transportation by building out the needed EV charging infrastructure. National Grid also takes the stance that utilizing existing gas infrastructure is going to be critical to accelerating the clean energy transition while still keeping costs affordable for our customers. So to do so, we have a strategy to decarbonize our gas networks using the pipes already in the ground to deliver cleaner fuels. We also have initiatives in place to integrate technologies like heat pumps to decarbonize heating. So now I'm going to talk about some of the initiatives that comprise our strategy specifically for the future of the electric grid. As an electric utility, our strategy is focused on maintaining grid reliability while accommodating the increased number of distributed energy resources. In the past, electricity flowed mostly from fossil fuel power generating stations through the transmission and distribution grids to homes and businesses. The grid of the future is going to have to accommodate electric vehicles, distributed energy resources, storage, electrified heating systems, and smart home technologies. So these are the things that we're working to address with our plans. Again, always keeping in mind reliability and affordability. So to start out, customer-facing initiatives like AMI, Advanced Meter Infrastructure, and the EV Make Ready program are going to help the grid to be more compatible with clean energy technologies that are being adopted by our customers. So AMI is going to deliver value for both our customers and us as the utility. Smart meters are able to monitor usage in real time, which supports grid reliability and provides greater visibility of outages, resulting in faster response times. They also support affordability because they provide more information to customers about their energy usage patterns. They also, or this information can be used to help identify opportunities for cost savings through energy efficiency and demand response measures. So energy efficiency and demand response are going to help to support reduction in overall demand and thus the associated emissions. And then the EV Make Ready program is designed to support businesses that want to install EV chargers for their customers. So this is one of the ways that as a utility we can support affordability while still driving the CLCPA goals. By providing incentives for our customers, their cost is decreased, allowing them to invest in technology that supports the clean energy transition. The transmission network also has to be upgraded in order to accommodate more large-scale renewable generation. So the map on the left illustrates the opportunities identified by NYISO for renewables development in New York. But all of these projects still need to be interconnected to the grid. Utilities are often thought of as a bottleneck for large-scale renewables development because the interconnection queues can be so long. So National Grid and New York utilities, other New York utilities, have initiatives in progress to reduce the amount of time that it takes for LSR to be interconnected, which is going to help accelerate the pace at which we're able to meet climate targets. National Grid is also investing in the build out and upgrade of our transmission system, which will increase the capacity that the system is able to handle. New York State is currently experiencing the largest build out of transmission infrastructure in 40 years because it's critical to supporting load growth and the expansion of renewables. So the map on the right here shows the Smart Path Connect project, which is rebuilding 90 miles of transmission and upgrading substations along the way. And this project is expected to eliminate over 1 million tons of carbon emissions and save hundreds of millions of dollars in congestion costs. And so these initiatives fall more under the grow our organizational capability priority. But I want to talk about them here because they also support the electric grid of the future. So digitization of the grid is going to be critical for ensuring reliability and resiliency as the electric system becomes more complex. So National Grid was actually awarded $50 million in funding last October from the Department of Energy. This was funding that was made available through the through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA. So we're going to use this funding to invest in 3 grid modernization technologies. The first is FLISR, fault location, isolation, and service restoration technology will help to minimize system interruptions. So Flizzr enables an automated remote communication between reclosers on the distribution system, which allows for a real-time response to a fault and minimizes the number of customers impacted. So this helps with reliability. In some cases, it also will eliminate the need for a response from a crew. So this will reduce our operational costs, which will result in lower costs to customers. So it supports affordability as well. ADMS, the Advanced Distribution Management System, is a combination of software and hardware that provides greater visibility of the distribution grid to those working in our control room. And then the Distributed Energy Resource Management System, DERMS, supports an increased volume of DERs on the system and allows us to leverage their load balancing capabilities. DERMS should also help us to reduce interconnection queues for DERs. So these are more behind the scenes investments, but they're going to be critical for allowing us to better manage the grid, again, as it becomes more complex. So National Grid is also a natural gas utility. So we've developed strategy to support decarbonization of the heating system. In New York, only about 14% of households currently rely on electricity for heating. So the greenhouse gas emissions that are generated from natural gas for heat are pretty significant, and they account for about 39% of total emissions in Massachusetts and New York. So our strategy is composed of 4 pillars. Similarly to the electric system, natural gas demand is expected to grow. So to combat this, we want to reduce the associated emissions by implementing energy efficiency measures. We expect that we'll actually be able to achieve about 1/3 of the necessary emissions reductions from energy efficiency measures, like better insulation and weatherization of buildings and the installation of more efficient appliances. The second pillar will build out a fossil-free gas network, integrating renewable natural gas and green hydrogen into existing pipelines. I'll talk more about this on the next slide, but gas plays a critical role in many businesses. It provides heating for manufacturing processes and for cooking in restaurants. Hospitals are also required by federal law to have 2 sources of energy. So natural gas plays a critical role in emergencies and provides backup generation during outages. So these are some of the reasons why maintaining our existing networks with cleaner fuels is a critical part of our gas strategy. The third pillar supports customer choice and provides them with strategies to maximize the benefits of electric heat pumps paired with their existing gas appliances. So this configuration generally allows customers to install smaller and cheaper heat pumps, largely avoiding costly retrofits that can be associated with upgrading heating systems. And then pillar 4, we're also working to identify areas for targeted electrification and networked geothermal. So for some customers, electrified heating using air source heat pumps is a good option and can be especially cost effective for anyone that's currently relying on oil or propane heating systems. Ground source heat pumps are also another electrified heating option, and they can be connected through geothermal networks. So there's no singular solution for decarbonizing heating, which is why the 4 pillars of our clean energy vision cater to the needs of different customers. So for example, our gas territory in Brooklyn, where I live, is really densely populated with a lot of multifamily housing, often in buildings that are more than 100 years old. And these will be really difficult and costly to electrify. My apartment still relies on radiator heating, and as much as I'm in favor of electrified heating, I'd be pretty annoyed to live through the construction that would be required to replace my current heating system. So in downstate New York, renewable natural gas makes a lot more sense than electrification to decarbonize heat. So the picture on the left is from our Newtown Creek renewable natural gas facility located in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. So we have a partnership with the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, and we use the biodigesters pictured to capture methane from food waste and wastewater that's then processed and blended into our existing natural gas pipes. And like I mentioned on the last slide, we're also investigating networked geothermal as an option. Geothermal technology is not new. We're able to leverage the relatively stable year-round ground temperature to provide cooling in the summer and then heating in the winter. So for geothermal, boreholes are drilled anywhere from 500 to 600 feet into the ground, and then pipes are run into the ground and then beneath the streets, circulating water between houses and underground. And then ground source heat pumps can be interconnected with this system to provide heat and cooling the same way that air source heat pumps do, but with a more minimal impact on peaks in our electric system. Networked geothermal also utilizes existing knowledge of our skilled gas workforce, as well as knowledge from the oil industry. So this lessens the amount of retraining and upskilling that would be required to carry out the clean energy transition. So on paper, it seems like a really good option. In Massachusetts, National Grid actually received funding for a networked geothermal pilot project, the first of which is taking place in Lowell, and they've already broken ground. But even though a majority of the cost for this project to customers will be covered by the grant funding for the pilot project, we're still facing a lot of challenges with customer adoption. Many people are not willing to live through the construction associated with the retrofits that are necessary to convert to geothermal. And the goal of widespread networked geothermal is ultimately to decommission the natural gas system. However, every single customer connected to a section of the natural gas system has to agree to switch to networked geothermal for this to be possible. So customer adoption is proving to be one of the greatest challenges for implementing geothermal networks. So in the near term, it seems to make the most sense for new developments, newly constructed neighborhoods. All right, so I've talked about our strategy for upgrading our electric infrastructure to support the CLCPA goals while meeting the needs of our customers. I also talked about some of the ways that we can rely on existing natural gas infrastructure while moving away from fossil fuels. But now I want to talk a little bit about why an integrated approach is so critical and why National Grid continues to advocate for the role of existing gas infrastructure in decarbonization scenarios. So this chart from NYSO shows how the electrification of heating is going to impact the electric grid. Currently, demand on the electric system peaks in the summer when people turn on their AC, but as more customers install heat pumps, demand is going to start to peak in the winter, and it's expected to be a higher peak than we're currently seeing. So to meet the state policy targets as they're currently written, the number of households relying on electric heating will have to grow by 90%. But this won't come without a cost, both to customers and to reliability. Right now, our natural gas system actually provides 3 times the amount of energy at its peak compared to peak demand on our electric system. Said another way, to fully electrify all businesses, homes, and manufacturing facilities in New York, we'd have to quadruple the capacity of our existing electric network. And remember, the PSC has to approve any increase in customer rates. But New York State lawmakers are pushing for a high electrification scenario to meet CLCPA targets. So there's a disconnect between National Grid strategy and what we believe is going to be the most technologically feasible and affordable path to decarbonization, and what state lawmakers and regulators are in favor of and currently pushing for. Complete electrification is going to be really costly, and in a lot of cases, especially downstate in Brooklyn, it's not technologically feasible. So for the time being, National Grid will continue to advocate for clean fuels and their role in a fair and affordable energy transition. So I just talked a lot about the different programs and technologies that National Grid is pursuing to enable the energy transition, which I think is probably the most interesting for those of you that have an engineering background. But now I want to spend some time talking about how we take the needs of our customers into account when developing and implementing our strategy, because our customers lie at the heart of our business. So the demographics of New York State are really interesting, but that means as National Grid, we have a diverse customer base, and that's why it's so important to take into account their needs as we develop strategy. We have about 1.5 million customers in upstate New York. Most of these are electric customers, but we also have some gas and dual fuel customers, meaning that we serve them both as a gas and electric utility. A majority of our residential customers upstate own their homes, so they're good candidates for energy efficiency programs, integrating smart appliances with AMI. They're also more likely to own cars, so EV infrastructure is going to be really important. In upstate, we also have a lot of large manufacturing customers, and these facilities demand a lot of energy. So we might work with them on demand response or incorporating distributed generation to reduce the strain on the grid. In downstate New York, in New York City, we have all gas customers, but nearly half of these customers are renters. So they have less control over building retrofits for energy efficiency measures or electrified heat. They're also going to be less likely to want to absorb the cost of long-term investments if they have a short-term lease. In Brooklyn, we also have a higher number of low-income customers, so affordability is a bigger concern. And then thinking geographically, it's going to be a lot more difficult to install a geothermal loop in downtown Brooklyn. However, we already have an RNG facility in operation. On Long Island, we also serve only gas customers, but they have the highest rate of homeownership and the highest average annual income. So this means that many of our Long Island customers might be good candidates for heat pumps or networked geothermal because geographically it makes sense and they're more likely to be able to afford the cost. So even though we have these different clean energy technologies available to us, our strategy has to account for what our customers need in each region, because what makes sense upstate might not make sense for our customers downstate. I'd also like to briefly touch on affordability for customers that may already be struggling to pay their bills. We have an energy affordability program available for our low-income customers. The PSC actually requires that energy bills not exceed 6% of household income for households that are below the poverty line. So we offer adjusted rates for these eligible customers. Starting in December of last year, we also added a solar credit to this program. So community solar developers are able to contribute credits to this program, and those are then translated into bill discounts for our low-income customers enrolled in the energy affordability program. So this is one of the ways that we're ensuring nobody's left behind in the energy transition. So our fourth strategic priority is to empower our people for great performance. And we have over 10,000 employees in our New York business. However, to enable the clean energy transition, we need an expanded skilled workforce. A study by NREL, shown in these graphs, projects significant growth in the number of clean energy jobs in New York that are going to be required to deliver the clean energy transition. However, when they were surveyed, more than 50% of energy employers in New York responded that they found hiring to be very difficult or somewhat difficult. So as a result, state agencies like NYSERDA and National Grid are investing in workforce development programs. Project C is an initiative at National Grid that supports our communities through various sustainability programs and grants. They also invest in workforce development by offering scholarships, mentorship programs, internships, and different training opportunities. Many of these programs are also focused in disadvantaged communities. So we're working to empower the communities that we serve, supporting economic development, and also providing job opportunities that will allow us to carry out the energy transition. So that was a lot. I want to take a moment to review the components of National Grid strategy that I discussed. So we're enabling the clean energy transition by installing smart meters and EV charging infrastructure. We're also modernizing our electric networks and building out transmission. We're working to decarbonize heating with the use of renewable natural gas and heat pumps. By better understanding the needs of our customers, we can then choose from this menu of clean energy technology and invest strategically in our communities, all while offering affordability programs to make sure nobody's left behind. I only touched briefly on the ways that we're growing the capabilities of our organization, but everything that we do behind the scenes aims to support more efficient operations, resulting in lower costs for customers. We're also working to empower our people and investing in workforce development to keep pace with what's required to combat climate change. So our strategy takes into consideration all three aspects of the energy trilemma. We've identified options for decarbonizing our gas networks and technology to support renewable generation and EVs. We're investing in grid modernization and building out infrastructure to ensure reliability. We also offer programs to ensure affordability for our customers. But I don't think that the energy trilemma quite captures the complexity of what's required for a successful energy transition. While we have the necessary technology available to us and have outlined a strategy for decarbonizing our energy systems while maintaining affordability and reliability, the pace at which the energy transition can proceed is still dependent on resource availability. We can't install smart meters unless the PSC approves that cost through our rate case. We can't build out transmission infrastructure unless we can procure the necessary materials at a reasonable cost. We can't enable EV charging infrastructure unless we have a skilled workforce that's trained to do that work. We can't invest in renewable natural gas if lawmakers are requiring full electrification. And we can't build geothermal networks if our customers don't want to make the switch. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to the energy trilemma because the problem is so complex. As a society, we've been relying on fossil fuels for more than a century. A zero-carbon energy system that's still reliable and affordable won't be built overnight. National Grid strategy is multifaceted because it has to be. We need innovation across all sectors. We need resources dedicated to scaling quickly and safely. And we also need cooperation from policymakers to ensure that the transition is fair. So a successful clean energy transition is going to require a complete transformation of the way that we think about and interact with our energy systems. And I'm proud to be doing just a part of that work. So with that, thank you for your time today. Please put any questions that you might have in the chat, or feel free to come off mute. I'm happy to have a discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura.
Hey, Laura, it's Alex Romanowski, Lehigh Energy Systems Engineering student. Couple of questions for you. First, with the transition to renewable natural gas, how much is National Grid projecting that they'll be able to get from landfills and biodigesters from food relative to the current demand for natural gas now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I know right now we're working in Greenpoint. So it started as just sewage, just wastewater. And now New York City has actually expanded their composting system. So we've been able to collect food waste from that program, which is increasing the amount of renewable natural gas that we're able to produce. But unfortunately, I don't know, the numbers for how much we expect to be able to support. But I'm happy to, when I share this presentation out, I have the Clean Energy Vision linked, and there's more information there about, how we expect renewable natural gas to play a role.
Awesome, thank you. And then second question, what do you think the biggest blocker for people deciding to opt into network geothermal is? Is it just construction, or are there different terms associated with it? Do they see decrease in building performance?
Yeah, so I think right now the biggest concern is cost. Even though we're able to cover a large portion of retrofits with grants, there's still going to be some cost to the customer. And over 5 years, we don't expect that the reduction in bills is going to quite cover that cost. So I didn't touch on supply chain a lot, but as we continue to invest in new technologies, the cost is going to come down. So it's kind of a balance between how do we get people on board early, who are the customers that are most willing to be early adopters of new technology, who can support the cost as we implement the technology, build the skills of our workforce, and see costs fall so that we can then start to include more customers.
Awesome, thank you. Great talk.
Yeah, of course, thanks.
Hey, Laura, my name's Glenn. I'm an alum, and I live in New Mexico, and I do some work on policy. And we're working towards zero emission long haul trucking. And it seems like it could go with electric trucks or hydrogen trucks. And if it goes with electric trucks, they need something called mega chargers, which look like huge development on the electric grid. I'm wondering if anything like that's going on in New York, what your plans are, what you think about it.
Yeah, so I'm not able to talk about our plans in great detail, but that's part of our initiatives related to enabling EVs. We're also identifying locations along highways, along key corridors, where it makes sense to enable electric trucking.
Okay, yeah. Another quick question is for the renewable natural gas. It seems like the supplies were limited. So what percentage of your system could realistically be delivered as renewable natural gas?
Yeah, another great question. I don't know off the top of my head what that percentage is. I'll share the link for our clean energy vision. I think the number might be in there, but I can get back to you on what we expect that to be.
But my guess is it's probably less than 50%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think at the time being, so that's why renewable natural gas is not going to be a singular solution. So we can't just replace our existing demand with entirely renewable natural gas. So that's why we need things like energy efficiency to reduce demand, and then things like networked geothermal and electrification will also help to decrease demand on the gas system.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course, thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to ask if there are students who've got questions, we'd like to make sure we get students to participate. Spencer, are you a student currently? I know you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah, I'm a undergraduate physics and economics major. And I was wondering when you were talking about the new technologies, are you investing in like startups or are these established companies that you're investing in to implement their technology?
Yeah, so I didn't show it. If you remember on one of my first slides, I had a diagram of kind of all of the companies that fall under National Grid Parent. We have a company called National Grid Partners, and they are actually investing in development of clean energy technologies. So us as a regulated utility in New York aren't able to make those investments, but National Grid Partners is doing work to advance technology in the clean energy space.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Other students? I know there's a number of questions in the chat we can go through next.
Yep.
But if we get a chance one more time.
Okay, so if you have any questions, just put them in the chat or like they said, ask out loud. Brad Price asked, he said, you mentioned old radiator heating systems hydronic that are prevalent in the Northeast. Have there been any new developments in geothermal heat pump technology that make geothermal more compatible with old radiators? I understand that the current heat pumps work well with forced air handler systems, but not yet well enough to meet the temps needed for radiator-based hydronic heating systems to be coupled to geothermal.
Yeah, that is a good question. My familiarity with geothermal is geothermal networks with ground source heat pumps connected. So I don't know much about how geothermal could be paired with radiators. I think radiators are probably pretty prevalent mostly in downstate New York, where we have a lot of older buildings. So that's why we're looking at renewable natural gas. One, because there's not a ton of space underground already to add a geothermal system, but also, yeah, I think renewable natural gas might make more sense to utilize the existing infrastructure and reduce the need for upgrades, if that answers your question.
Okay, next question. Frank Richards said, another disconnect, all the inexpensive, plentiful shale natural gas located under New York State that isn't allowed to be harvested? Question mark.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. In the spirit of decarbonization, shale natural gas is still a fossil fuel, so doesn't play a part in the carbon emissions reduction of our strategy, I guess would be my response there.
In thinking about, this is Frank Richards, follow up on that. In thinking about renewable natural gas, isn't all natural gas renewable? Didn't it all come from compressed fossil stuff that got eventually, you know, let the earth take care of things and make natural gas for us to use as an energy source?
Yeah, but the time frame for fossil
Right.
fuel natural gas is significantly longer. So being able to capture emissions from food waste or sewage that is already waste we're producing as a society, being able to collect that and use that as a fuel source, I think is sustainable, and there's a shorter turnaround time on how renewable it is.
Of course, the point is you already have a whole ton of it, not a ton of it. You have megatons of it under your state that isn't being harvested for political reasons, right? So it's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Andrew Coleman from EPRI. I just wanted to make that was a really nice presentation. There is active shale gas development in the state of New York. It's just heavily regulated. And there's also a misnomer about where shale gas is actually taken out of the earth in the upstate Catskill Delta. A lot of the future onlooking shale gas that would have been east of the Hudson River is really actually more difficult to access. The west is where a lot of the shale gas is. There is development of it, although it's been much less, and it's very highly regulated. And it's different in the stratal. It's different in its deposition, or at least the reservoirs are different from the Pennsylvania shale gas in western PA, which is in the Marcellus shale. Different shales in the Upper Devonian are the shales for the upstate gas. And renewable natural gas is not the same as natural gas. We're talking about producing gas from power from renewable energy, which would produce biogases. So those are carbonaceous, obviously, but they're not taking from the natural gas, which would have been formed under the earth. And once that's combusted, it's not renewable at all. In fact, it's a long story, but I just wanted to answer that. And then lastly, on the geothermal, there is a lot of ground source geothermal that's available in upstate New York and also western Massachusetts, and that ground source geothermal is sort of limited by the glacial presence of glacial till. It's much harder to put in big drilling wells that will have heat exchange. And then obviously there's, what you talked about with the heat exchangers. It just depends on the depth of the heat, the drilled wells and the temperature of the water. But there's some very big geothermal projects going on in New York City, and those are just for makeup water for some of the thermal plants in Manhattan. So geothermal is active and very busy right now for district heating across the United States. And last week it was in Washington, and they had a World Resource Institute discussion on all these things. So lots of publications online, lots of information at Department of Energy, should you be more interested in it. Sorry, thanks. I just want to help provide some information.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Coleman. I appreciate it.
Okay, next question, we have Tom W. Your effort will require massive digitization of the grid and its components. A great target for cyber criminals. How are you addressing the issue? The cost and manpower.
Yeah, so this is definitely a component of our strategy. This is something that falls under that growing our organizational capability strategic priority that I didn't touch a whole ton on. But there are federal and state level requirements for ensuring security of our grid and of our resources. So I think some cost, there are a lot of internal initiatives in progress right now where we're ensuring security of the grid. So I think yes to both cost and manpower.
Great, thank you. John asked, does National Grid own generation? Is the grid scale solar development strategy your own generation or enabling other development? And he also said, good presentation. Thank you. Good to hear about electric and gas.
Thank you. So yes to all three. National Grid parent company owns generation. So on that first slide, again, I talked about National Grid Ventures. This is the deregulated part of our company that operates separately from our regulated business in New York. So they do own solar generation. We are also, we won a bid for to be able to develop offshore wind off of New Jersey. So we will also own offshore wind generation. So our strategy is about being able to enable interconnection of any large-scale renewables in our service territory.
Okay. And then John also asked, how is energy affordability determined? If target inflation is 3%, is the energy inflation target also 3%? Who is doing the math or the strategic energy plans and affordability?
Yeah, so I can tell you I'm not the one doing the math, but we have more than 10,000 employees in New York. We have teams dedicated to understanding our operating costs and trying to bring down our operating costs. The way the rate case works and the way our profit is structured, for every dollar that we save in operating costs, we're able to invest $8 of capital. So we have a lot of teams working on making our operations more efficient, reducing operating costs to save the ratepayers money, but also creating space to invest in more capital projects. And then, yeah, of course, we have teams also looking at customer affordability. So somebody's doing the math, but it's not me.
Great, thank you. Corey Martin, also one of our ESE students, asks, what are the plans for the carbon that will be produced from the renewable natural gas?
Yeah, so, and feel free to like speak up if you want to elaborate on this. But I think the plan right now is the same plan for traditional natural gas that's being used in our systems. A lot of the times it's burned for fuel. So unless there are carbon capture systems in place, I think it'll continue to be emitted. But the difference is that fossil fuels, in theory, are emissions, or it's carbon that's stored underground, not part of the atmosphere. But we're producing waste as a society. And so we can capture the methane that's being produced from waste already and clean that, process it, and feed it into our gas systems. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, there's still carbon, so it's not a carbon-free fuel source, but it's fossil fuel free, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's not good. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Sajad Al-Shamari. When I'm trying to improvise here. When updated, transmission line with underground cable or keep overhead line?
I think the plan is for most of our transmission infrastructure to continue to be overhead.
Okay, and Andy Chung, also one of our students, asks, how does the National Grid plan to better inform lawmakers and other relevant organizations of the, I'm sorry, my thing was covering, of the most effective way to decarbonize our grid?
Yeah, so we have a corporate affairs team, and their job is to build connections with lawmakers and bring in our subject matter experts to educate them on some of these strategies. So we are working with lawmakers to inform them about different technologies that are available, the cost to customers, the costs to reliability. So we are involved in that conversation and working to educate the people making decisions.
Okay, I think we're caught up in the chat questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, could you elaborate more on like what digitalization would mean for the grid and like how it makes energy production more efficient or energy distribution more efficient?
Sorry, can you repeat the first part of that?
Like the digitization of the grid, like how it makes the grid more efficient.
Yeah, so I think it's largely digitization provides more visibility of the grid. So whenever we're monitoring like for faults and all of the different resources that are connected to the grid, better visibility allows us to better balance load and reduce outages, reduce the likelihood of a fault. So I think that's primarily like more visibility and more technology to be able to look at different parts of the grid all at the same time and how everything interconnects will help with reliability. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions?
Laura?
Ron, did you have a question?
Yes, Laura, this is sort of a side topic, but anything new on Canada supplying more electric energy to the New York area?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about that project in particular. If you haven't noticed, my job is very high level, so I know a little bit about all of the things going on, not a ton of detail. But I do know that we're working to build transmission infrastructure to bring more hydroelectric power into New York and downstate.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Andy again. I was just wondering whether the National Grid has any like programs to better like inform like customers and like residents of New York of like futures of the electrical grid and how to like better understand the grid itself, because I know the grid is very complicated. So
yeah, that's a great question. So we also have customer and community engagement teams. So we have teams that go out and do tabling at different community events and make sure that we have a constant presence in the community, making sure that we're able to educate our customers, answer any questions, and develop a better relationship with our customers. And then also on the education piece, like in upstate New York right now, we're working to deploy AMI. So we sent out mailers or emails to all of our customers with information about what smart meters are, what the benefits to them as a customer will be, and then also information about what installation was going to look like, how, and the app that they'll be able to use to look at their energy usage and how that interacts with a smart meter. So every time we're making changes, we're always interacting with the community and making sure that they have the opportunity to be educated.
about the problem of cybersecurity, are there future plans to implement like microgrids to reduce the possible consequences of cyber attacks?
That is a good question. I think, as I understand microgrids, they're generally operating, I think, outside the realm of the utility. So I'm sure that there are plans for microgrids. I don't know a ton about it or how that fits in with National Grid strategy. Lots of great questions. I will be sure to share my presentation with all of the links. So if I wasn't able to answer your question, hopefully I can provide the resources so you're able to learn more.
Laura, we had another one that just popped up in the chat from Adediran Babalova. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Which of the energy trilemma are majority priority or of greater percentage, and how are these measured to capture progress or achievement?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about the energy trilemma, the goal is that we need to be able to do everything all at once. So we can't quite pick and choose. Like if we are just sustainable and we built out infrastructure super quickly, that would help us to achieve climate goals, but at what cost? Reliability to the system would be compromised and bills for customers would skyrocket. So I think there's no singular piece of the energy trilemma that can be more important than another one. We have different technologies that provide different benefits. And I tried to outline that through the presentation. There are some technologies that cater more to reliability and less to sustainability, but we need all of these different pieces of the puzzle to achieve the clean energy transition. And as far as measuring progress and achievement, we have internal metrics for all of these different parts of the strategy that I discussed. I'm not able to share those, but we have ways that we're measuring progress, and the regulator also sets a lot of goals and that we have to perform against. Any other questions?
This might sound like kind of bad, but like why is inclusivity in the energy transition so important? If like I don't know, because I would think like just the percentage change is the most important, since like the reduction in carbon emissions affects everyone, so everyone can benefit from them. So why try to distribute it as opposed to just focus on like where we can easily
Yeah, so inclusivity kind of gets into the environmental justice piece of the energy transition. So you mentioned that everybody is impacted by carbon emissions equally, but that's not really the case. There are communities that are more vulnerable whenever we talk about the impacts of climate change, and traditionally have been more significantly impacted by industrialization. So as National Grid, it's important to us that we are bringing these traditionally, these vulnerable communities, disadvantaged communities along with us so that nobody's left behind. Because as we know, like electricity and natural gas heating are almost a necessary good. Like every time there's a power outage, there are reports about loss of life. So whenever we think about the clean energy transition, I think it's important to be inclusive, to make sure that nobody's left behind, but also to make sure that the communities that have been more impacted historically are being targeted for investments and are being elevated. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm trying to like picture what that looks like. So is that like instead of having a natural gas plant in that community, like we would replace that with solar panels, and so you're not.
Yeah, I think that's one example. I think our energy affordability program, including the solar credit, allows people that might not have been able to afford to install rooftop solar panels to receive the benefits of renewable energy. Whenever I was talking about workforce development, a lot of our outreach is in traditionally disadvantaged communities. So trying to invest in economic growth to support those communities, but also to support our goals of building a workforce, building out a skilled workforce.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. That's a good question.
Okay, any more questions? If not, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank Laura once again for this excellent seminar. I think questions indicate a good level of interest and engagement with topics that you presented. We really appreciate you taking the time to do so. And again, a virtual round of applause for Laura.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate all the questions, and thank you again for the invitation to speak today.
And just briefly, I know Susan mentioned it in the chat, but our next ESE seminar will be on Monday, March 4th at noon. The speaker is Wibke Permid, who's the head of market and market development at PTX. The topic is going to be hydrogen. Thank you.
Great job, Laura. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Do you mind if I get back in touch with you? A lot of the topics seem very interesting and of interest, and there's might be some opportunities to do some collaboration here at Lehigh. Like maybe I can touch base with you.
Yeah, definitely. I meant to share, I have a contact slide here, but I think Susan copied us both on the email, so you should have my work email now as well. So feel free to reach out that way.
Thank you.
And Susan, I can share the deck with you. I'm not sure if you send it out, but I'll get that over to you after this.
Sounds good. Thank you. And then everybody, we do post the recording up to our Energy Systems YouTube channel. So usually by the end of today, it'll be up there if anybody has an interest in reviewing the recording again. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Shirley.